question that comes up today is one you need to resolve actually to, if you take this form seriously, I'm talking about now the world of painting that we're struggling in. If you take this form seriously, you need to understand whether or not abstract painting has any value. And you need to understand too, as Ned asks, whether traditional painting has any value. One of the strange things about life is we do things that we perceive value in. Nobody tells us they have value. Nobody, in so many words, necessarily. I mean, at some point, maybe yes. But I remember anybody ever saying to me, look, great art has value. I remember seeing it somewhere and then looking more deeply, just in an encyclopedia, to see what painting and sculpture were doing and what they were about and that sort of thing. But I don't remember anybody saying something like this has value, you must do this. I mean, most people think that taking care of your neighbor has value. And this, and it's fundamental to all the sort of the cultural norms to say that, to take care of the children, to take care of older people, to take care of your family, to take care of your land. Everything we know about in terms of what has value. Love your neighbor as yourself. That whole world everybody understands the value of that world. But when you get to the world of painting, there's something that we do. We're charged to do it in some way. We're called by inspiration to this world. There's just this great big yes to those of us who actually are responding to a yes. I'm hoping that that's what everybody does. Normally you taste food and you don't say, is this food or is this not food, or good food, bad food. You just taste food and you say, this is good. And some people actually get to the point of wanting to be able to make that, and to offer it to others and so on. So how different is it in painting? So when Ned asks, do I think that abstract painting has any value? It's an interesting question. What do you think why do I think traditional painting has value? You really have to sort, values is a huge personal thing. And then culturally, it's also a good, important thing. My guess about the modern era is there's a destructiveness that's gone on since about the turn of the 20th century, where all of a sudden we're saying that everything has equal value. The trash has equal value with beauty and so on. So there's an interesting question. I do recommend, if you'd like, that you ask me for a copy of my essay, Art and Revolution, where I talk about the background of some of that kind of conversation. But if you're trying to destroy a culture, that's a good question. What do you, to bring trash in and call it painting and that sort of, call it art? I mean, and confuse the heck out of people. But most people get into painting for yes reasons, right? And I love that mentality of the yes, the great yes. So, so do I think traditional painting? Why? That's there are a couple things you might try on, and that is that you sense that it does. and But I'm not going to tell you I know in one sense why. I just know that food that has nutrients is good and somehow good for us, and I think that music that's good is good for us. And as I say, now they've done tests and have demonstrated that good music, that classical music, for example, is really good for plants, helps them grow better, and that certain kinds of rock music actually it shortens the life of a plant. It makes makes the life miserable. It's an interesting question, So, do I think it has nutritional value? Yeah, I do think it does, but so much of it depends on what the purpose was in the painter in the first place. Are we working to bring value? Are we working to elevate the mind and soul of our neighbors? Are we finding the good, the beautiful, the true, almost as if you were to bring plants to market? Are we looking for the very best we can find? So, it's a question that you have to answer when it comes down to whether you're going to do it or not. But I think it's a huge, and I say you have to answer it because I don't want you spending your life doing something you think is frivolous. But it's a prayerful question. Keep asking it in a prayerful way, asking it with meditation and deep thought, and as it suggests you're doing here. But painting is a form. Music is a form, right? Now, music is abstract, and there's a key part of poetry that's abstract, right? They both have moods. They have a lot of the human content to convey, but they are abstract forms. Dance is an abstract form. So if I think abstract painting has any value, the answer is, of course, I do. That's how I think all painting has abstract value. So I know you didn't exactly ask that, but that's an interesting question. So I'm just going to show you my background, and at the same time, I'm going to say just one thing, and that is that I haven't found that Western abstract painting automatically has good value, but then I haven't found Western painting automatically has good value. We value certain paintings more than others. And so and I mentioned before, I think the question I had with Kepes, and Kepes is going to be my central character in this response. But Georgi Kepes of the Visual Arts Department at MIT, when I pointed out to him, I said, like 95% of the stuff that's like what you're doing is like trash, don't you think? I was a kid. And he says, well, sure, but then 95% of what you're doing the people around you are doing is trash too, and possibly we didn't use a strong word as trash. I probably said not very good or something like that. And his response was a very interesting one, right? So in other words, even in his mind, there's a yes to a certain percentage. And I would say that you ought to do that same thing with representational painting. Don't just say it's good. People can do evil with it. People can mislead children with it and that sort of thing, and lead them into a life that would actually be self-destructive or something. But things like that can happen. And I don't want to overstate that one, but there are levels. There are levels. So let's see. Let's just have a look at some abstract painting, and you can sort of decide that for yourself. I'll tell you about one story, and that is when I think I was in the Army, possibly in Washington, D.C., when I was in my 20s, and there was a show there, and I want to say it happened about that time at the White House and it was just abstract. I think it was just the work some of which I'm about to show you, which is called American Abstract Expressionism. And whoever curated the show, and I'm guessing it had 60 or so paintings, had drawn forth really beautiful work, at least according to the catalog, what I saw in the catalog. I didn't see the show, I saw the catalog. I think I saw it after I'd left DC, by the way. And it was a very good thing to see, because in this whole body of stuff is something that a whole bunch of people, just as in Western art historically, that a whole bunch of people over time are saying yes to. And that's the whole culling out thing. It really isn't happening in your times. It's happening after you leave, which is kind of an interesting thing, as in terms of the challenge of whether you're going to be survivors or not. And so, because you can get all sorts of acclaim, you can get marketing going on, you can do all sorts of stuff. Doesn't mean your work is good. It doesn't mean it's going to survive as a value into the future. So let's look at pictures. That's what you guys are here for, as we all know. We had that discussion, Mr. Producer, about whether this would actually move for me easily. And there, did the double jump. So I went through it and started it up. I think I must have restarted the program again, blew it up to the presentation size, and I think that's what's causing that to hesitate on me. If I don't say it here, I'll forget to say it later. All right, so here I am looking at Kepes' modern abstract painting. These are all paintings possibly in the range of 60 inches or so. Not all, but he works big and he works in between. I think I even see fairly small ones. I don't think I'm amused by much of his work, but there's a handful that really, really intrigues me. And I'm talking about now visual intrigue. I'm definitely not one of these guys who's looking for meaning in all this sort of stuff. Even with Gamel's work, I don't think that's where the value lies. Even though that's the source of his visual cogitations is sort of psychology. I don't think that's where the interest lies. And whatever else it is over at MIT, in terms of these, what is it called, semiotics and things like that, This, what you're looking at here, is going to be survive because it's pleasing to people on their walls. The two things that Kepes brings is a color sense, three things: a color sense, a sense of light, and a sense of texture. And those things are pretty special. I actually meant to put gold frames around these. Hey, Paul, you let yourself down there. I always put gold frames. His pictures actually would be these big things, but then he would have a gold, like a piece of wood. It was gilded on one end, and that end would go around the painting. And it was very nicely done. Really, really, really excellent for the number of pictures he'd be putting out for a particular show, in terms of not expending your whole entire fortune on gold leaf frames. Gold leaf is one of those things that brings value to your painting because it shows that you respect your painting. There are a lot of years when Hunter said you respect your painting by, I mean, he didn't use these words, but you respect your painting by putting colors around in the frame that go to the painting, that go with the painting. And those were days when I'm not sure how much of his paintings had gold on them. And eventually he went back to using gold again. But I always think of it that way, as it just shows some respect that you're actually saying there's a little bit of we're moving toward the edge of an exotic value, a real, the gold, the gold standard. Anyway, so you're seeing those three things in these works. I asked him once about a light that he was showing in one of the paintings, and I didn't find it in the search, but I asked him about that, and I said, that looks like you are describing something. And he said, well, that actually came to me while I was working, and it was a scene from the woods in Hungary, as we would be approaching, when I was a child, we'd be approaching my grandfather's house at Christmas time in the evening, in the snow and the sled, whatever. He was describing a pretty interesting scene. And through the woods, there'd be that inviting light breaking through the trees, through the woods. And so you see a fourth thing, if you want to put it that way, in his work, and that is a suggestivity, right? In other words, even though he's not a representational painter in the literal sense, he's suggesting, he's intimating, as all good poetry or music even does, is intimating a sense of life, a sense of the real as we know it. And I'm not going to tell you who does it every time. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying in the ones I like, I see a ton of that. But so you're going to see good color schemes with him, fascinating, interesting color schemes. And to show you a comparison, I don't do this all the time in my composition class, talking about the color aspect. But here's Frederick Layton. Here's academic, Mr. Academic. And using basically an orange painting, orange-dominated painting, and then he finds the purpler notes that go well with it, and these subplot-type greens that go with that. And you see that here on the right bottom, again, with his textures going on. This is sand, by the way, and glue, and a lot of other interesting stuff that he's plowing through this thing to make the patterns fascinating. On Kepes, you're seeing that texture that I talk about. But they're a version of the same color scheme. Now, not obviously the one on the bottom right is totally loaded with orange. This the one above is slightly less than an orange painting per se. You know what I mean? It's a more neutral thing rather than having an overall color intensity. What do we call that? The chromaticity is just slightly stronger in the Kepes, Kepes, by the way, Gyorgi, RGY, Gyorgy. I think we lost him about 15 years ago or so. You could look him up. And so here's two more. Now the one on the bottom could easily be a Monet, couldn't it? And but it's interesting in the way that we think. Now I'm telling you that when you do paintings, your job is actually to see the abstract beauty. Because by definition, in my view, by definition, abstract / is beauty. Abstract has a slash, and beauty is the rest of that word, or whatever, however you want to put abstract - beauty. But the abstract, and so you see a sense of pattern in that lower one. You see see the light in the distance. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Whatever else Kepes is doing, I have known some of the modernist guys who said, I got to succeed, and everybody's painting abstract, so I got to do it. But I'm gonna borrow all the goodies from Monet or something like that. I've heard that discussion. In any case, you can see all sorts of latent other people here, and by the way, the abstract is the visual world, right? And so in one sense, you could say it's all borrowed, but in the other sense, you could say it's all seen. Everybody's seen it all the time. We just don't know how to reduce it. And I think my last video might be one to look at, but it's this one about nature. You really want to look at the world, in a funny way. You're looking at the world as if to say, how is that interesting visually, right? And then you're trying to bring we're really trying to sing the praises of our Creator in terms of the visual content of the world. Not about everything else, not the stories, not the philosophy, right? That stuff, or not the morals, but the visual beauty, the visual amazingness. So we're finding these things to bring home, these jewels, emeralds and gold. In any case, there we are. You're seeing all sorts of interesting interplay of abstractions and so on. I say abstractions meaning the same sense as what you would have if you had an actual painting with real people in it. And I'll show you more on that subject. So I think both of these upper ones are this guy Hoffman, and Hoffman was a big influence out of New York, and then you see books about color from him. But if you look at the Japanese one down below, you'll see that these guys really aren't inventing color theory. They aren't inventing color, but they're using beauty as the basis of determining whether or not a color scheme makes sense, right? And what's new? That is not new. But what's interesting is that coming from Degas, Degas is the guy that really separates it all. And he says, look, let's stop thinking about this stuff as first a story and secondly color. And he says instead, let's look at it as what it is, as visual beauty. And so that's why I say to you, don't you see? Here's a picture that you might say has an acidy element to it and a warm element, but the greens go in that direction. And they interplay throughout the picture. These other yellows to pinks, whatever, they come out of the flesh tones and get richer over here. You see this whole thing is just simply, it could be if you turned it upside down, shall we say. It could be any number of these other modern painters. But Degas is the guy that actually wakes it out completely. And he says, look, we're neglecting the music. And I don't know that he ever said that in so many words. But he says, look, we're neglecting the music. His work tells us that we're neglecting the music. And so here's another one picture on the left. It could be Vitlichil. I don't know who this is, and I apologize to anybody who's listening to this to get history. He was in the American Expressionist site, but I only picked it because it has a particular color scheme I find pleasing. And again, there's that purple and orange. You could say it's the same colors as the Leighton we looked at a few minutes ago, except they're all changed. So it's dominated by this greenish thing. Secondarily, the purpler one, and lastly, the feature one, you might say, is rather the pinker orangey one, right? Now, each of these pictures, this one by Gamel on the right and the one down below by Degas, each of these pictures is like a fully colored picture. It's like they're not neutralized to death. And they each have their abstraction and their distribution of spots and the color weaving and all the rest of these things. And so all this stuff is coming from the same roots, right? There's no difference. The abstractions of painting are what they are. As I said before, the question is your motives. When you start doing stuff to tweak your grandmother's nose, you just leave this world, I say, and to the extent that somebody will stay alive and keep marketing your stuff, you may stay alive like Picasso sort of does. But in the end, if somebody stops marketing your work, the first to go is going to be those kinds of people who have disdained the most fundamental things about elevating your neighbor and so on. Anyway, so those are just fun, and again, you can see how Degas is like the introducer of this stuff. It almost gets to the point with this one where he doesn't care what the subject is. He's just far more interested in this interplay of stuff visual. And which is the argument, of course, to be made by all the abstract painters. Isn't that what the game is? And I do think that what happened is Degas opened that up. I don't think there's any other way of discussing it. I think Degas is the guy that opened this up. And here's Gamel. But now if you just look at these without looking into them to see what these pictures are about, you'll see exactly the same stuff as all the modern guys. Just distribution of color reds, an interesting pattern across a screen, block out patternistic stuff, and, interweaving of all the colors. Standard, absolutely standard stuff to all abstract painting that's any good. Where else can you go? I mean, color on a screen, where can you go? You follow me? Well, there's a little bit more to the whole thing than color on a screen, and that is Degas introduces this other thing about making patterning intriguing. So where in the past people would use patterning and they'd try to make noble patterns and stuff, he would just say, let's make pattern interesting. He would start making interesting tunes out of pattern. And I'm showing you these two. If you just blur your eyes a little bit and just don't see what anything is, you'll see these blocks of darks, on a middle tone, and you'll see, yeah, and you'll see immediately where Kakash or Klein rather is coming from. This is Franz Klein. And I think Franz Klein, by the way, has a background in traditional painting, traditional Western art. That's Franz Klein in the two left ones. He's got these wonderful gestural abstractions of just dark on light, just full of emotion, if you want to put it that way, fraught with emotion. But they, in their management of the rectangle, they obey all the laws, and then you can compare it to some of the Japanese painting or the Chinese painting, the brush painting, where you see pattern. If you don't know what this is, the point is, are you still intrigued by how interestingly the pattern plays on the page? There's no new problem under the sun, is there? This is a very simple problem that we're in, the visual order problem, the visual music problem. Here's a picture on the left of Bunker. Now you can see what I'm talking about if you don't look at that hard. Just look at these and look at that without thinking. You'll see that all painters, when they see they have pattern is one of the intriguing things, right? So you don't miss it. You have to learn to identify it, much as I was talking about the difference between nature last week and this other thing, what we pull out that we make this thing we call art from. But pattern is one of those things, and so you're trying to get an intriguing pattern, you're trying to place it intriguingly in a rectangle. That's not different. Modern art's not different that way. It's all exactly the same. And so we can argue, of course, right at this point that what is different, right? What is different is they've reduced it to simple abstraction and have sort of taken away the human element. And that's an interesting question, whether or not they become more pure, and that's a good thing, like pure music without words, or whether or not we miss it entirely too much by it not being having the complexity of the human thing, which is maybe more like you could call songs, music plus words. That's a question, and I don't have to answer it. I just know that both of these things, that the abstractions of painting live in a representational painting world. But you could say slightly muddied, or maybe not. It's an interesting question. As Gamble said, if you're talking about keeping yourself in the room to keep working, I hope you have a subject you like then. But I do have to admit, sometimes having done one of those Franz Kleins, I doubt that I'd be interested in doing two more. But he did quite a wall full, some of which are pretty intriguing. And I've shown you a couple of the ones I like best. Now, the one on the bottom right there, that's just a photograph in my studio. And if you can just blur your eyes a little bit, you'll see the same thing. It's just an intriguing breakup of a page. And again, I want to look at Franz Klein talking. Now, he doesn't have different values, basically two different values. But the idea of intriguingly breaking up panes with just dark planes with dark abstractions, a picture plane with dark and light abstractions, that's us. We live in an abstract world. Now, that's either intriguing and fascinating and pleasing on levels that are, if you want to call it spiritual, that's a tough one. But certainly they're sensed, they're felt. To some degree, they might be intellectualized, but they're not. What shall we say? I think we better just stick with the idea of they're felt, the felt beauty of them, the felt sense of expression. What do they express? Well, it's just a photograph. But even here, you could mine some of what this is up to abstractly in relation to you and your senses, right? Visual senses. And of course, these visual senses are all connected to your internals, your sense of life, your spiritual elements, your soul, shall we say. Now, here on the left is the John White Alexander one, and I'm again just showing it to you because it's a picture that's, if you just take it as an abstraction, it's a middle tone picture with dark and light, intriguing dark and light patterns going through the picture. You see the spots, the big dramatic spot of light here, and the spot distribution. It's just an abstract painting. And I say that it's just an abstract painting. I mean, at its best, it's taken the abstractions and really done aesthetic work with them. It's really done pleasing stuff with the patternistic element of this, with the spotting element of this, all the things you'll find in painting. This isn't a highly colored one, but then lots of even Kepes' work isn't highly colored, even though the ones I showed you are almost hyper. But you can see that so instead of just doing black, he's done a middle tone ground, and he's doing black patterning, just like Klein, and he's doing also light patterning. So, and the one on the right is just a portrait of my daughter. I've shown you from time to time, but you can see what it's trying to. If you just can think of it abstractly and stop seeing a person there, you'll see what I'm doing is rather like what a lot of the Japanese prints are doing. It's just an intriguing abstraction, and I'm trying to make it totally intriguing. So basically, a light canvas. Even the face is all. This is all basically lit. So it's really the whole thing is really in what is happening in this dark pattern. So how is that different from Klein? Well, just different because it has more other content, right? It's more complex. So I think that's the story. I think I'll leave you at that, and love to have more discussions on this. But I don't really want to become this guy who's telling us what's good and what's bad and what we should do, what we shouldn't do. I'm just talking about the beauty of the abstractions of painting. And one more time, so it's nice to have this question follow on the heels of the one about nature, the discussion about nature. All right, do subscribe, share, comment some more, keep on liking whatever else you can possibly do on there, and we're hanging in there. As I said last time, we're going to be on a once a week schedule for the next month. This will be the last two per week set. So I hope you hear this and are prepared. I'm not sure how many blogs I'm going to get on. I'm in the middle of this 6-week intensive myself. I got 5 more weeks of it, so it's a relief to me not to have to produce 2 of these a week, much as I love doing it. So, all right, well, do enjoy. Thank you for your question, Ned. Don't let overanalysis keep you from what you love. Go forward with what you love until you know it's a wrong thing to do. That's an interesting, different model than finding the perfect thing to do. All right. And yeah, just blessings in your work. All right. Have a great week, guys. Take care. See you a week from today, probably. All right.